Welcome to Team Racing Basics. Today we're going to be talking about Mark 1 of the Team Racing S course. Mark 1 is a windward mark rounded to starboard, which will be very unusual for you if you're used to fleet racing. So we're going to go over how to control this mark, how to convert your teammates, and how to defend against opposition. My name's George Potter. I've been team racing for 10 years, and I've competed at a high level at both university and at a national level, and I'm going to impart some tips which are hopefully going to help you win more of your races. Starboard hand windward mark roundings are normally used for team racing because they make the race much more interesting. If you're fleet racing, you'll normally round a windward mark to port, and what this means is that it's almost always better to approach the windward mark on starboard, which is going to give you a much cleaner rounding. It's hard for port boats to approach the mark and tack underneath. They won't have room, they won't have any rights to go there, and that's going to make it really, really difficult for them. In team racing, by using this starboard hand rounding, this gives the opportunity for port boats to pass ahead over the top of boats on starboard, and means that you're going to end up with a much more interesting race where boats split away from each other up the first beat and can use both sides to try and win the race. The flip side of this interesting mark means that we're going to get far more port starboard incidents, we're going to get far more boat on boat incidents at the mark because both teams, both boats are using different ley lines because there are options available. This means we get messy Mark 1s where lots of things can happen. I think Mark 1 is probably the hardest and most complex mark on the Team Racing S course, and so there's a lot to think about as we approach it. Particularly relevant to this is the fact that often at Mark 1, the race isn't fully won or fully lost, unlike at Mark 4, say, where often a winning team will be in a strong combination where there's nothing the opponents can do. This means that it's often a mark where you're going to have an incident where you're going to have lots of things happening, so it's important we know how to manage it. The fundamental dilemma of Mark 1 comes from the fact that normally, up the first beat in team racing, what teams will do is they'll split into pairs. So yellow here are ahead of both of these blue boats. Maybe yellow completely won the start. They were both ahead from the very beginning of the race. Now what yellow want to do up the first beat is they want one yellow boat to stick with each of the blue boats. Now the reason we do this in team racing is because we want to prevent any one opposition from getting too much leverage, from getting too far away from the fleet. So if this blue boat is left on their own and goes all the way out to the right, what happens if they get a big lift into the mark and they get ahead of all of these other boats? So what is prudent for yellow to do is to pair up. But the problem with that is that when we're pairing up, we then need to work out as we approach this mark, how can we go around the mark in such a way that we can end up in a 1-2 combination or in some sort of strong winning combination and not end up with a blue boat in between these two yellow boats, even though yellow should end up in a 1-2. They should end up both ahead because they're winning both pairs. So how can we do that at Mark 1? Well, the answer is, to this question, that it's hard. There's often going to be times when you're not able to do it, and preferably what's going to happen is up this first beat, we have loose covers. So when yellow's ahead, they can extend the gap between their opponent, they can tack on top of them, but whilst they're still maintaining good distance, so that as we approach the mark, you can have a situation where the boats tack in like this, and you can see this blue boat on the left has no chance here. But there are going to be times when you end up tightly bunched together, and we need to work out how we can come around this mark in an optimum combination. What we really don't want is something like this blue boat catching our yellow pair, getting their pair through, and the yellow and the blue boats ending up in a sort of 2-3 here. Now, in 3-boat team racing, there will also obviously be 2 other boats on the course, making this even more complicated. So we've got to work out how we can end up rounding this mark, whilst at very least still winning both pairs, and even better, ending up in a 1-2. So at Mark 1, all the power lies on the starboard ley line. So if you're coming in on starboard on this ley line, you're going to have complete control over any boat that's coming in on the opposite ley line. Well, sort of. And I say sort of because if the boats on this ley line have done the right thing, you might not have control over them fully. If you're coming to a windward mark in team racing that's rounded to starboard and you're coming in on the port ley line, my number one tip to take away from this video is that you should always try and tack a boat length above the ley line. You never want to be on a tight ley where you can't quite make the mark. And the reason you want to be over the ley line is because if a boat attacks you and you're above the ley line, if they're coming to you and they're on starboard, then you have two options. If they slow down, you can sail over their top. And if they come to get you, then you can pass behind their stern and still round the mark. And this is important because if you can't round the mark from this position, if you were a boat length lower and you're only just making the mark and they come for you and you bear away down to go behind them, then this boat here, when you go behind them, could tack on top of you. And now you're locked and unable to get to the mark. And that's going to allow a teammate of Blue's to get through. It's going to allow them to pass. So we always want to make sure, if we're on the port ley line, that we are above the ley line, which gives us the option to either pass ahead or to duck behind a boat on the starboard ley line. Now, some of you may be thinking, if this boat is coming down to get you, if they're bearing away from you, what's to stop them from pushing you the whole way down? What's going on with that? Well, there's a really important rule called Rule 16.2, and 16.2 means that if you're on a beat to windward, if a port boat is sailing to go to leeward of a boat on starboard, and the boat on starboard can't alter their course if it's going to result in the port boat having to immediately make a change of course of their own. So that is a rule which basically prevents any boat from doing a really aggressive dial down on you if you make it clear that you're ducking them, if you start sailing to leeward of them. So the next question to ask is, how can we convert one boat through? How can we, as yellow here, control a blue boat into Mark 1 and allow a teammate to get through? Well, the answer to that is that yellow here needs to get blue overlapped with them. Now, blue is probably going to have no choice but to be overlapped here. Blue's got a few options. First of all, blue could go above, but they don't have room. So if they go above, they're going to get a penalty. They can also be luffed and they don't have room. Really bad place to be. Blue can just stop. They can slow down. But if this yellow boat tacks in the right place, they're just going to sail around the front. That's obviously bad for blue as well. Which leaves blue with one kind of meaningful option left, which is that blue can sail underneath yellow if yellow is trying to do this kind of mark trap. This yellow boat tacks onto port, one boat length above their ley line, like we talked about before. Well, now we've got this pair of boats coming at them. And again, yellow here has options, which is that they can either pass over the front. So if blue slows down here, if they're trying to slow down and prevent there being a lane behind them for yellow to duck past the mark, then yellow can simply sail over the top. But if they come forwards to try and get them, then this yellow boat can block blue from tacking, and the yellow boat behind can pass behind their stern, and then yellow are going to be in a 1-2 combination from that setup. Now, one of the complications for this, one of the common penalties that you see, is that what the yellow boat here thinks is that they think that they don't matter for that port starboard incident. So let's say the yellow one over here, the yellow on the port ley line, is trying to get over the front. Well, we get to here, and it looks like yellow are easily going to make it over blue. So now both the yellow boats are thinking, great, okay, we've done it. But blue here is still the leeward boat. So one of the things you can do here as blue is you can now luff yellow very hard. You're still giving them room. You know, they're rounding the mark. You're giving them room. You're the leeward boat. That's fine. And this yellow boat might pass blue. But now this yellow boat, especially if they're not quite at the mark yet, if they can't quite get that tack in, this yellow boat, sometimes what you see, will then put its nose down to duck behind its teammate, thereby infringing the blue boat. So this is why, as that yellow boat, you really need to be above your ley line, so your teammate has space to tack in underneath you if they need to, if you can't quite make it over both boats. A position that's much harder to do a conversion from is like this. If you have 3 boats all on the same ley line, then we're going to run into a problem here, because blue can essentially do any of the things that yellow wants to do to them, to the yellow boat behind them. What yellow needs to happen to make that conversion work is for blue to go underneath and then carry on sailing all the way past the mark so that yellow boat has space to go inside. And all blue needs to do is just like sail underneath and then sail slowly, or not sail straight underneath and wait for this yellow boat to be sailing underneath them. It becomes really, really hard. And you might think it's easier because, well, what if they sail slowly here and this yellow boat gets overlapped above and gets room? But that isn't really the way it often pans out. It actually much more commonly ends up in this situation where it becomes a very hard conversion to do. And you either need quite a big gap so that this boat's been setting up for ages in advance. So maybe if there's a very biased start line or some boats are spinning off the start line, there might be one pair who gets to Mark 1 far before the rest of the fleet. But it's not that common a situation, and it can be quite hard to actually get this boat through if they're right behind you. It's much easier to get that conversion off if they're on the opposite side, if they're on port. So if you're seeing a teammate setting up, if you're trying to get a 1-2, it's kind of a 1-3 situation, counterintuitively, being on the giveaway side of the beat is actually a more powerful position for your teammate to be able to get the conversion off. Getting into this kind of position takes quite a lot of forward planning, because earlier on in the beat, when you're far away from the mark, blue, if they're competent, will be seeing you trying to do this, and they'll instantly come down and try and get a lock on this boat. They'll be trying to slow them down, because if they know their teammates are behind, they'll know that they can't let you get a 1-2 combination. So they're going to be doing everything in their power to stop you getting a 1-2 combination. If you're coming in ahead of your teammate on the port ley line and you want to convert them through, well, that's going to be difficult. Like we said earlier, all the power at this mark is on the right. So unless you want to go and tack on the right-hand side, and then you might be able to do something, unless you want to do that, you're normally better off if you're on the left, just rounding the mark. I mean, you don't want to overcomplicate it. Mark 1 is still at the very beginning of the race, so there's no point throwing it all away. That being said, if you want to act, it's always best to do it earlier. So you've got a difficult decision to make there, but whether you have the space and you have the opportunity to convert a teammate through if you're ahead of the opponent, but you're on the port hand ley line. There will be times, particularly in close races, where you're going to have all 6 boats potentially in a 3-boat team race, all 6 of them converging on the mark at a very similar time. And this creates a really, really complicated situation, and it will normally be very messy. But generally, the same principles still apply, which is that we want to be above the ley line, so we have space to duck underneath opponents. We're going to listen closely for any calls of room to tack. So remember, if you're on port tack and there's a starboard boat coming for you, if you're the leeward boat, you get to decide whether you want to duck underneath the opponent, in which case you still need to give any boats who are to windward of you room to keep clear of the obstruction and pass it on the same side as you. But also you get the option to cool if you want to for room to tack. And I've got a whole video about how to do this and what the procedure is for this, but essentially you can call for room to tack, and they either need to say you tack and then keep clear of you, or tack themselves, which in a situation like this means that they will have to tack too. And you can see now that this yellow boat has gone from being controlled by the blue boat to when they both tack, they're now in control of the blue boat. So when you've got 6 boats coming in, you can end up with pile-ups with lots of boats shouting for room to tack. You can have port starboards, you'll have boats slipping through, you'll have enemy slipping through, enemy coming down to take control of other boats who have tried to do a port starboard, and it gets really complicated really quickly. So my advice is you have to keep your head out of your boat, think early about what you're going to do, try and keep control of your pair, so at least have control of your one boat, even if you can't get control of the race, and make sure you're above the ley line and keep your options open. So good luck with this mark. I recommend you go and practice it. You can practice it by doing feed-in setups with 3 boats in a line and practice that difficult conversion of getting that blue boat underneath you and then yellow round. Or you can also do the same setup, but with a boat tacking in towards the mark, and see if you can get the conversion off that way. I really recommend you go and do that if you want to get better at this mark. It's always going to be complicated and hard, especially when you've got lots of boats coming in. So the other thing to do is just to keep entering yourself into events and doing lots of racing, because you'll get lots of racing scenarios at this mark. There are also 2 quite niche penalties that I'm going to talk about in a future video that happen at this mark. So make sure you subscribe and like this video if you want to see those and learn more about how to team race better. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.